welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Junglist. Big news this week, gamers. We think we may have actually found it. A game based on a movie that's worth playing. Hugh Jackman stars in X-Men Origins Wolverine, an action-adventure game with claws.
And another sex symbol returns to the screen. Yes, Leisure Suit Larry is back. His last game was banned in Australia, but his latest box office bust has passed classification, and we check it out.
Old Larry is infamous in the annals of game history because of all the fuss his antics have caused over the years. It prompted us to take a look at other games that have provoked controversy in this week's Backwards Compatible.
Plus, downloadable content. Is it a way for you to keep your favorite game fresh with shiny new content, or just another method for greedy game makers to squeeze you for every last cent? More on that later, but first, can you guess the game for this week? Tricky one. We're not actually in the game. You have to guess it just from the sound. News time!
News! Good game! A new study by the University of Iowa is claiming that 1 in 10 8 to 18-year-old gamers are suffering from gaming addiction. The study defined the gamers as spending at least 24 hours a week playing, as well as displaying many of the symptoms of a compulsive gambler, like lying about how much time they spend playing and evading real-life responsibilities like homework. But CEO of the Entertainment Software Association, Michael Gallagher, has questioned the accuracy of the study, as the participants were not selected at random, but via a reward for opinion website. The study's author, Dr. Douglas Gentile, has stated he was unaware the group of gamers was taken from a so-called convenience sample, and hopes that his study will facilitate an educated conversation on the positive and negative effects of video games. Pre-production on the movie version of BioShock has been put on hold due to budget concerns. The film's director, Gore Verbinski, and Universal Pictures are now looking at ways to reduce the estimated $225 million the film was going to cost. Options include moving the production outside of Hollywood to take advantage of tax laws in other countries. Both Universal and Gore Verbinski have stated their enthusiasm for the project and are anxious not to see the BioShock film go the same way as the canceled Halo movie. And another project is in trouble, with Konami announcing they will no longer publish 6 Days in Fallujah. The game, which was to be released in 2010, recreates the events of one of the key battles in the current Iraq War. But reaction to the game's announcement has been met with widespread criticism, causing Konami to withdraw its support. It's not confirmed whether another publisher will pick up the game. Good game!
Wolverine is definitely the best X-Man.
Says you.
He totally is, shut up. But his track history in video games hasn't always been great. Now, as a tie-in with the movie, X-Men Origins Wolverine stars our very own Hugh Jackman. Junk, I didn't think I'd actually like playing Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in a game, but he kind of adds a lot to the character.
That's true, and you know what else? That Hugh Jackman, so hot right now.
We haven't seen the movie yet, but we're told the game revolves entirely around it, with some extra drama thrown into some very gory and beautiful cinematics.
You act out the game's two storylines in tandem. Until you beat the game, it can be kind of hard to work out what's going on, but they do move well together, showing Wolverine's past and present.
Developer Raven Software go a ways back, right back to the days of Hexen, Heretic and Soldier of Fortune, so you can see how their love of dismemberment carries on here. They're also quite familiar with Wolverine, having made numerous X-Men games and Marvel Ultimate Alliance. It's quite a marvel.
Never stop moving, and you feel like a massive hero as Wolvie just shrugs off enemy bullets as if they were a mere annoyance.
He's a machine and no one can stop him, and unlike a Ninja Turtle, he's not afraid to use his weapons for their intended purpose, to slice and dice everything into as many pieces as possible. You can hurl enemies around and then lunge into them even before they've hit the ground, upon which you have the option of mashing their face into the ground, throwing them up for aerial combos, using one of your 4 abilities, performing a huge close combat move, or using an environmental object, or simply hurling them over the edge. Jung, I love a game that allows you to throw as many enemies off a cliff as possible and rewards you for doing it.
After last week's review of Flock, we know just how much you'd like to do that, bitch.
They deserved it, Jung, and you know it.
Wolverine's a rewarding game in general, especially if you go off the beaten track. And the boss fights! From riding the back of your enemy and blasting apart a half-built robot's head, you know, it's all just fun and there's so much variety. Battlegrounds change and fall apart all the time, and some boss fights go on for ages, such as the bout with Gambit.
Mix all that in with counter moves, upgrading of stats and abilities, and a giant robot fight, and you've got yourself some pretty tasty action. Another thing the game does well is surprises, whether it be traps or ambushes, or accidentally encountering an environmental object in the middle of a fight. There is the odd time where the game takes you into a stealthy approach and it doesn't really work, so it's good you're not forced to do it. It's not really Wolvie style anyway, Jung. You can't put that man in a cage.
X-Men fans will especially enjoy playing through Wolverine's defining moments, such as breaking out of the lab where his adamantium was administered. And there's no overuse of goons either. The game is perfectly balanced and you never get tired of smashing face. There's also some massive levels, including some where you just climb higher and higher.
Some locations do get reused, but once again, there's no stretching of gameplay here. They'll mix it up with a new boss or new enemies.
Most of the time, you'll feel like you're playing God of War as you button mash circle, move rocks into place, and climb along vines. At other times, you feel like it's the Force Unleashed as you recover from falls, dash about, and perform aerial moves. And at other times, you feel like it's Mad World as you slam enemies onto spikes or forklifts, only to have them squeeze off it if they're not pummeled enough to go quietly.
And at times you feel like you're playing Gears as you're forced to walk at a snail's pace while story is shoved down your earpiece.
Hang tight. I'll be there to give you... Ow! Ah!
It's kind of like being behind a slow walker.
Understood. This mission just got more complicated. Okay, it's time to take out the trash. Junglist out.
Oh, it's the only part of the game I don't like, and it's barely worth mentioning, but I want to because it makes me cranky.
Yeah, that makes me cranky too.
Cranky! I know I'm a Wolverine fanboy, but that just means I want this character treated with respect. So, because it's a movie game, I was really worried about this. It was a really nice surprise, though. A great movie game. I loved every minute of it. I'm giving it 9.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
There's plenty of hours here, and even though the game ends kind of suddenly, and the camera can be a bit stubborn, you'll get your action fix out of Wolverine and then some. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Oh, that really hurts. Oh.
Good game.
Congratulations on not being devoured and purchasing the... Congratulations on not being devoured and purchasing the Wagglemax Zombocalypse Survival Kit. In your kit, you will find everything you need to survive the undead horde. A selection of the finest weaponry we could find in an afternoon. A range of magical hard-boiled candy treats, and your choice of 3 of the following assistants. Our highly trained Zombocalypse companions are highly trained to protect you with their cohesive teamwork tactics to ensure you survive with as many limbs as possible. So whether it be fast or slow infected, T-virus or rage virus, or just a bad case of Monday-itis, rest assured, our survival kit will keep you safe as safe houses from this horrendous zombie apocalypse.
Good game.
Nowadays, just sitting down to play a game can be a very complicated process. Your first challenge is just getting the thing out of the box. Then it's getting it installed, and there's almost always a patch or update that taunts you with a never-ending progress bar. Come on! And if it's an online game, whether it be Xbox Live, PlayStation Network, Steam, or whatever Nintendo call their thing, you're definitely going to need to offer up your theftable identity and fill out complicated login procedures, and in the case of Xbox Live, subscription fees to boot. Yes, long gone are the days of being able to buy a game, plug it in, and just start playing. But why has this happened? Why? Why? We'd like to think that developers and publishers want to give us something extra out of the goodness of their hearts, but even hearty goodness comes at a price. Whether it's your gigabytes or time waiting for a patch to come on! Or the extra costs involved in downloadable content, video games are starting to be packaged as meal deals. extra content, online map packs, cosmetic character upgrades, collector edition bundled figurines. All of these things are starting to become more common with every major release. Some welcome, some not. DLC has been around for a while, right back to the 80s with Intellivision. In some parts of the world, the Atari 2600 had a game line service, and Sega Channel offered DLC for the American Mega Drive known as the Genesis, which is a much cooler name than Mega Drive. Purchasing downloadable content can be a bit of a minefield. There's lots of fancy systems in place to distract you from the fact that you're spending actual cash on a virtual hat. Microsoft and Nintendo use a fun cash system. To purchase anything off Xbox Live, for example, you need to purchase Microsoft points. Now these come in set denominations, which means after a purchase, you almost always have leftovers. And it's kind of like how hot dogs come in packs of 9, but the buns in packs of 6. And the thought of these delicious leftovers slowly hacks away at the back of your subconscious, itching for you to use them up. But it's a total merry-go-round, and the only winner is the merry-go-round keeper person. I don't know what that job is. This system takes you one step away from the fact that you've spent real-life money on these fancy, fantastical arcade tokens. But don't be fooled, it's fun money, and only usable in Funland, and it's not the good Funland. At least Sony and Steam say it how it is, cold hard cash. The big problem with DLC is you don't always know what you're going to get. It's not usually cheap, and it's not really something you can take back to the store. This is the molten core of our niggle. There's a very big reason that developers and publishers want you to hang on to your game for as long as possible. Of course, there's revenue generated from DLC, but most importantly, it comes down to trade-ins. Say you buy an awesome AAA game, you beat it in a day and now only have memories to hang on to.
My memories of moments gone past linger and last and warm me.
There's no real reason to keep it, and chances are you'll probably sell it, trade it in, or unethically take advantage of a store's return policy. So it's in their interest for you to hang on to your game. And it's why in-store limiting digital rights management is becoming more common, and might be why some DLC is being released in the same week as the game. There's also platform-exclusive DLC, such as Grand Theft Auto 4's The Lost and Damned, which is another kick in the guts to anyone who doesn't exclusively own the platform. There's also pointless DLC, rubbish picture packs and themes are everywhere, and there's no real way to preview the rubbish before eating it. And you know, developers have every right to offer you something extra to entice you to hang on to your game. But the real drama ensues when the DLC should have been included in the first place, or even if it feels like it should have been, such as the recent multiplayer DLC for Resident Evil 5. As a gamer, sitting on your couch, staring at those ever-inflating dollar signs and fun cash points, it's hard not to feel like you're being squeezed for every cent you have. Go on, take it then.
After the wild success of games like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom, programmer and designer John Romero was one of the hottest names in gaming. That was, of course, until this came along. It's called Daikatana, and it was an ambitious first-person action game that spanned several different time periods, had an epic storyline involving future samurais, ninjas, and lots of mutant frogs. And it promised to be the best thing since Quake. It wasn't. Daikatana spent more than 3 years in development from 1997 to 2000, and when it finally surfaced, it was a sloppy, directionless mess with poor game design and dated graphics. Naturally, it didn't sell too well. John Romero, what were you thinking?
Good game.
Controversy. It can make a game famous, or it can doom it to obscurity, and there's plenty of examples of both in the pages of gaming history. First up, the most common cause of video game notoriety, violence. And when it comes to the earliest days of arcade gaming, few games top the pedestrian pummeling carnage of Death Race. That's right, good gamers, this is what the most violent and controversial game of 1976 looked like. It was truly a shocking black and white pixel fest, where badly drawn cars collided with badly drawn pedestrians, which would not only end their miserable lives, but would also earn you lots of points. As As a result, it was one of the first video games to cause large-scale unrest amongst easily offended parent associations, who promptly took to the streets to protest the game's depravity. But did it really deserve its bad name? Probably not, and here's why. The game took its name and inspiration from the 1975 film Death Race 2000, a cheaply made exploitation flick produced by the king of B-grade movies, Roger Corman. It starred David Carradine and Sylvester Stallone as rival race drivers in a contest to see who could run over the most pedestrians before they reached the finish line.
Women are still worth 10 points more than men in all age brackets. The big score, anyone, any sex, over 75 years old, has been upped to 100 points.
It was fantastically trashy stuff, but it was fun, and today it's considered a cult classic.
Oh, shit!
Same premise, different delivery method, but did Death Race 2000 cause as much controversy as its video game counterpart? Of course it didn't. In fact, apart from a few poor reviews, the movie version of Death Race didn't cause much of a ruckus at all. Meanwhile, the video game version was driven out of business, with the game's publisher, Exidy, forced to cease production of the game after making only 500 units. So, if there's one thing we've learnt so far, it's that controversy isn't fair. Games usually come off second best when compared to other entertainment mediums. And if there's one topic that causes even more trouble than violence, it's sex in video games. Something this next game learned the hard way. Phantasmagoria was a graphic adventure game that was way ahead of its time, which happened to be 1997. It brought together intense psychological horror with logical puzzling, exploration, and full-motion video graphics to create one of the best adventure games of the 90s. And on top of all that, it was very much made for adults.
Somebody kept me up last night.
You didn't seem to mind so much last night.
Oh, no.
In fact, it was so made for adults that if you managed to get far enough into the game, or even just up to the game's intro movie, you'd wind up being treated to some side boob in one of the game's numerous simulated sex scenes. The game was promptly banned by the authorities. After its ban, Phantasmagoria did actually end up causing controversy. Although it wasn't because of its questionable content, it was because people were outraged that it got banned. It was the first game to really shed light on the inconsistencies of the Australian classification system. And it was the beginning of the public call for an R18+ rating for games.
5 teenage girls have disappeared after spending the night at the old Lakeshore Winery house of Mr. and Mrs. Victor Martin. Right now, another 5 girls are headed towards the Martins to spend the night. Your mission? Protect those girls from whatever happened to the last ones.
Night Trap for the Sega CD scared up some controversy with its scantily clad teenage girls being stalked by creepy vampire burglars, all in grainy full-motion video.
Music!
The Leisure Suit Larry game, Magna Cum Laude, was thrown out of the country by Australian censors due to its unwholesome bedroom behaviour.
Larry, let's go to the library and knock boots.
No, we did that yesterday. Let's do it in the planetarium.
Why not right here?
And of course, who could forget the commotion caused by Grand Theft Auto San Andreas when it was found that the game contained a little hidden hot coffee?
How about a little coffee?
Simply scandalous. But in this case, the scandal wasn't such a bad thing, with sales of GTA games soaring into the stratosphere. As sexy as games have become over the years, it's still violence that makes most of the headlines. Ever since it first came out in 1992, Mortal Kombat has made its name with its controversy. The game's over-the-top biffo and tongue-in-cheek fatalities, which often involve decapitation, dismemberment, or combustion of your opponent, helped generate a media backlash big enough to ensure that Mortal Kombat turned into a gaming legend. Others didn't fare so well though, like Rockstar Games' Manhunt.
Okay, are you ready? Camera, action.
The ultra-violent stealth horror game Manhunt was initially cleared for release in Australia with an MA15+ rating, after which it happily sat on store shelves for several weeks. That is, until then Attorney General Philip Ruddock lodged a complaint that saw the game banned from sale. Manhunt was actually an incredibly well-made horror game, and the ever-present gruesomeness only helped to reinforce its intense atmosphere. To the rest of the world though, it is usually held up as the most shocking example of video game violence, and with scenes like this, it was easy to see why. We could go on, but we think you get the idea. The bottom line is that if you're making a game, controversy can work for you. But most of the time, it's just gonna get you banned.
Good game.
Well, Badge, we're right up to date now with the games that caused a bit of fuss in their day.
Well, almost, Jung. The lounge lizard himself is back. That's right, Leisure Suit Larry in Box Office Bust. As we've already heard, the last Larry game was banned in Australia, but this one has survived classification intact.
You play as Larry Lovitch, who's asked to go undercover by his dodgy uncle, the original Larry by the way, who happens to own his own movie studio now. Secrets are being leaked to the tabloids, and it's up to you to find the mole.
If you've ever played any Leisure Suit Larry games before, you'll know that he spends most of his time trying to get women to have sex with him using his saucy banter.
I got a sweaty package here for you. Maybe you can sign for it with your lips. What do you say, baby?
The only thing I want to do to your package, loser, is take a pair of scissors to it.
He's been doing it since the mid-80s, and despite its racy reputation, his advances are mostly met with rejection.
And that's the case with this latest game, which is decidedly unsexy. In fact, it's decidedly awful. And I mean truly awful. I mean, it might have been okay to be set in this movie lot sort of thing, but after the umpteenth mission that sends you scurrying from the mailroom to deliver packages around the place, you'll be pleading for it to end quickly.
Larry's trademark banter in this latest game is, without doubt, some of the most puerile writing ever to get transferred into a video game.
Yeah, and the powder did kill most of them, except for the Queen, but it did a real number on my boxers, though. Yeah, feel free to use that in your piece.
And it gets worse as you go on.
On top of that, the gameplay is excruciating. Most of the so-called mini-games involve a race against the clock to get, you guessed it, from point A to point B on the movie lot.
Oh, that's right. Introduce a timer to place me under undue and unnecessary pressure. Oh, as if my life isn't stressful enough, now you shove a stopwatch at my ass.
And if you happen to get stuck in your almost impossible to control buggy, you'll fail the mission and have to do the whole painful process over again.
Yeah, and I'm wondering who the audience actually is for this game. I mean, the jokes are so juvenile, it's unlikely to make the smuttiest of smutties smile. And yet it quite happily sits at an MA15+ rating, mainly because of the overuse of swear words.
Why can't you just call him?
Me? Listen to that loudmouth hack? Just to cover up your up? Now get the hell out! And don't think this means you're off my list either.
And the depiction of women in this game, Jung. Look, if you're going to play a Larry game, you go into it knowing it's going to be overtly sexist. Larry's double entendres are the cornerstone of the experience.
Yum, yum, give me some. Looks like it's high time to get in position to shoot my loaded film all up in this camera.
I'm not excusing that, but in the past the games could get away with it because they were fun, funny, or clever, but this is none of those things.
The worst thing for me is that this game could be held up as something that was intentionally made for adults. And yeah, adults do want games made for them, but if this game's developers think that this is what grown-ups want, they need to be abducted by your alien space beam, Badger, because I challenge anyone with a functioning brain cell to find any kind of amusement in this game. I'm struggling to give it one rubber chicken.
Yeah, it's insulting, and what's worse, it's boring. I'm giving it 3 out of 10 rubber chickens because I did like the cinema location with the old film in the background, but the rest?
Is that your professional opinion?
Yes, definitely.
Good game.
So, gamers, did you guess the game for this week from our little audio clue?
It was none other than the original Quake, and that was its distinctive theme.
That theme song, along with the rest of the game's audio, was written by 9 Inch Nails mastermind Trent Reznor. Interesting fact, as a stamp of his work on the game, the ammo crates for the nail gun were appropriately emblazoned on all sides with the 9 Inch Nails logo.
Well, did you know that Trent Reznor is actually a massive Geometry Wars fan?
Well, do you know what's on next week's show?
Mm-hmm.
Hot on the heels of our feature on downloadable content this week, we'll be looking at a couple of games you can play and download for free.
We'll look at an MMO that has no subscription fees. And a look at games that have been given the principal's permission to be played at school.
If you haven't yet sent us your RAM, your favourite gaming memory, time to get your skates on.
Quick sticks!
Hurry up, in 60 words or less, tell us about your favourite gaming moment, and the best of these might get into the Good Game book. More details here.
Till next time, Digital Warriors, take care. Junglist out.
Bajo out.
Quick sticks!
Quick sticks!